So hello, everybody. Today's July 24th. We're going to start the third installment of the GitHub Demo Day. So welcome. Hope everybody's having a good Friday. We'd love to hear where you're calling in from today. We know we have a lot of people around the world. And if it's your evening, thanks for joining us. If it's your morning, cheers, get some coffee going, grab a beverage, and we're going to get started here in just a minute. So quick agenda. Fired up VS Code here. We'll start with some quick intros. We should probably get to know each other, before talking about each other's dependencies. So do some quick intros here. We're gonna talk about open source, of course, dependencies, the dependency graph, the insights you can gain from looking at this, security vulnerability alerts, and then automated security fixes. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'll start. I'm Glenn. I'm a solutions engineer here at GitHub. Quick background about me. I started my development career in C# application development. And then I graduated to mobile development with Xamarin. And then I joined Microsoft, and now I'm happily at GitHub. So quick page here. So we launched a feature recently where you can have a README file, so you can have Markdown as your profile page. So if you haven't done this yet, definitely take advantage of it. So you can put in cool GIFs and whatnot and kind of customize your page here. I'm a big fan of this feature. One of my big hobbies on the side is astronomy. And I think by the end of this stream, you're all going to learn a couple things about space. So for those of you in the Northern Hemisphere, there's a comet that's passing right now. I'm sure that you've seen it in the news or maybe on Instagram or something like that. The comet's name is C2020 F3, and it was discovered by the Near-Earth Object Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer, NEOWISE for short. This is going to be around for the rest of June. You just have to look north, 1 hour after sunset. So definitely go outside and do this. I highly encourage you to do so, and hopefully you will after hearing this. But no worries if you don't, because it'll be back in 7,000 years. So, if you just want to catch it then, just stick around for it then. This is what it looks like. It'll be a little bit dimmer than this, but if you use kind of like a tracking mount, you can capture it. So we have some other folks in the line as well from GitHub that will be helping with chat moderation. And, if anything is going on, Cory, just feel free to interrupt me as I'm talking. So we have Cory from the SE team who's going to be chat moderating. And then we also have William from product as well. I don't know if you want to say hi, Cory.
Yeah,
Cool.
of course. Hi folks, welcome. My name's Cory Dobson. I'm an enterprise solution engineer, same as Glenn. So we're your SE team for the day. Going to be digging into a bunch of things around essentially securing your open source code. I'm going to be moderating the chat while Glenn is going through some demos and of course some various content around this. So we're super excited. We're looking forward to it. I'm in the chat at Cory Dobson, so feel free to ping me there if you have a specific question. But I might be breaking up the stream if we have a really great conversation point on something that we want to talk about. Let's take a few minutes and talk about that. So this is your time as much as it is ours, so we're excited.
Cool, thanks, Cory. And if you want to see more topics in the future, or if there's something that's missing, again, this is the third time that we're doing this. Just drop it into the chat. We're happy to cover things in the future, and we really want to make this useful to you. Ooh, so there's just one quick thing too. So for those of you that want to actually be comment hunting, let me get back to astronomy real fast. So there's actually open source software, GPS software that's free. You can type in your GPS coordinates and find out exactly where to look. So sometimes I tell people to go check out this comet, and they're like, where do I look? And I can't find the dipper. So what's really cool is that, there's software to do this, and kudos to those developers that have built this. It's cross-platform. And I really mean that. It's for Linux, Mac, Windows, Game Boy. No, just kidding. They also have a web version as well. So if you want to just fire up the web interface, you can find out exactly where it's going to be and where you need to stand and what it will be near. A couple quick answers. So here it is, 2020 F3 NEOWISE. You don't need to have binoculars. You don't need to have a telescope. Yes, you can see this from a city. You just have to go outside and look. So it's something that's going to be really cool. Okay, without further ado, let's get into it. So I want to talk about open source first. So a couple months ago, we had a developer conference called Satellite. We have 2 conferences per year. One's called Universe and one's called Satellite. Sorry, we're getting an audio comment. Yeah, we're both using fancy external mics, so we gotta synchronize our audio volumes here, Cory.
Yeah, this is our first time trying out with the special mic, so hopefully we'll get it going here in a minute. Thanks for the heads up.
Cool, thanks for that. So we hit an important milestone. Our platform now, GitHub's platform now has 50 million developers, which is amazing. We're really excited about this and we're continuing to see growth. So I know we're on our way to 100 million, which is just so super cool to me. So first off, shout out to all the open source contributors on the line right now. We'd love you to share like what projects that you happen to be contributing to right now. And also shout out to the maintainers that are on as well. If you want to share your link in the chat, we'll give it a quick call out. But we wouldn't even be having this conversation without your contributions. So thank you for doing what you do. And if you want to check out the announcements from the most recent conference that we've had, there's a lot of cool stuff that's going on here. My favorite being Codespaces, which is a containerized development environment for VS Code. So what I'm basically saying is that you can code on your iPad. And if you want to go check out more about that, you can sign up for the beta, and we're letting people in. And then for those open source developers too, I want to make you aware that we have a sponsors program as well. We have a lot of folks now that are doing this full time, and you can open up and join the waitlist to monetize your account should this be something that you want to do full time. So the software that you contribute is extremely important. It's ending up in basically all software that we're developing. And we want to encourage people to do this full time. So you can join the waitlist and join this program if this is something you want to do as your full-time job. So open source is so important, in fact, that we recently just buried 21 terabytes of it in the Arctic Circle in an abandoned coal mine in the permafrost in the Arctic Circle. So if you want to read about this blog post, Cory's going to drop it into the chat here. For those of you that are aware of how much source code can fit into a gigabyte, try 21,000 gigabytes. So what we did here is that this is kind of like an insurance policy. For those of you that are aware of the Arctic seed vaults, it's kind of like, okay, if we need to rebuild society, right, we're going to need seeds to replant it. But open source and software is so important, and it's ending up in everything, that we don't want to lose that either. So our CEO, had source code essentially, and kudos to the people that have had their repositories end up in the Arctic Code Vault program. I think the criteria is that it had to be open source with a certain amount of stars, and we would put it in. Anyways, we just did this. We just converted the source code and made it human readable and put it onto film. We buried it, not like metaphorically buried it, but like physically buried it in this vault. So that way, as we're rebuilding, we have seeds, and then also too, we won't lose the software. And if you want to read more about this, you can go to the page archiveprogram.github.com. We also listed some top projects. So let's take a look here real quick. We got WordPress, neat. We got Node, Bitcoin. We got to rebuild the economy. Ooh, Linux, that's a good one. I think Linux, by the way, I think it runs on 3 billion devices now. So thanks, Linus and team. I think, this is going to be a solid one to preserve for the future. So, it's got 1 million commits. That's one that's going to be a good one to rebuild with. Cool. So check that out. And kudos to the people that had their source code make it into that program. It's actually been now deposited into that vault. And I hope that we never need to use it. But with that comment passing by, it just got me thinking, we got to make sure that we keep our space program very funded. Okay, so now jumping into dependencies. I want to sort of start out with a blog post that was written for an acquisition that we made for a company called Dependabot, which we'll get into in just a little bit. But a lot of people that I talk to are not aware of sort of how many dependencies they even have. And that's something I hope that we can educate you with, as a result of this stream. So most people are aware that they have their sort of direct dependencies, the packages that their application is referencing. And you're like, okay, I know about those. But if we really kind of look further into it, a package, right, is just software itself. And software relies on other software, right? Like we don't want to rebuild everything every single time that we write a piece of code. We really want to leverage what's been written already. I heard a statistic recently that something like 99% of all software projects now have some sort of open source. So this is not even an option anymore. For those of you that are full-time developers, we can't always just work on whatever we want to work on, right? Our time is allocated through work items. And if we try to build, convince our boss that we want to write our own JSON deserializer, they'll probably say no. Like just pull it down and use the one that exists and that's known and vetted and performant. So anyways, our dependencies also have dependencies. And then this is sort of a bigger problem for certain environments like JavaScript. So very quickly, we start to see how many dependencies that we're referencing. And then if any of these dependencies have a security vulnerability, for example, this ends up in our enterprise software, which is bad. We don't want this to be exploited. We want to consume open source and get our jobs done, but we want to do this in a responsible way. And we want to be educated about what we're consuming and how much of it. We also want to be aware too of the license types that are sort of combined with these packages. So that way, for the specific vertical that we happen to be operating in, we want to be aware, if there's a license type that we consider risky, we might want to migrate away from that package and go to a different license type that has similar functionality. So anyways, I just thought that was a cool chart because people are like, oh, okay, I only have 2 dependencies. And then we start looking further into it and recursively, it's kind of dependencies all the way down. Okay, so jumping into kind of a demo here. And again, I hope everybody learned something about sort of the dependencies that they're consuming. This is just my GitHub page, and I'm going to jump into the Fibonacci. Everybody remembers this from the coding interview, the Fibonacci sequence. By the way, real quick, what do people think about the new redesign of the repository page and GitHub in general? Things look different today than they did, even a few months ago. Are people digging this? I think it's cool. I like the layout, and I've been digging it. Would love to hear your feedback about that.
Yeah, we have a few folks that like it. Of course, yeah, I mean, we're big fans, but yeah, I would love to know how everyone feels about this.
Also, too, for that README profile that you can do Markdown with, would love to see what you're adding there too. Mine was kind of boring. I could spruce that up, but you could have a lot of fun there.
And Glenn, you're one step ahead of me, man. I haven't made my own README file yet. I need to jump on that.
Cool. So what I'm showing you here is that I want to get into the dependency graph. And the dependency graph is going to basically read the manifest file of our supported package types for a repository and give us information about our dependencies that this repository is using. So by the way, if you don't see this, this can be enabled by going into settings, and you can go into security and analysis. Furthermore, too, for an organization, so let's just say you happen to be a GitHub organization admin, you can go into settings and go into security and analysis, and you can enable this for all your repositories if you don't see this already. So we need consent. We don't just read your private repository files without your consent. So if this is not enabled for your private repo, you have to manually do this. Or you can do this globally by going into, as I showed you before, either into your repository settings or also into your user profile, and you can click on security and analysis and enable this as well. We can also configure this to enable this for all new private repositories. So if you want to give sort of blanket consent that we can read only your manifest files across all your repositories, we can enable this by default. And I'll show you in a minute that information will be aggregated into a Dependency Insights sort of unified dashboard where you can kind of see holistically across all your repositories information about what open source you're using, what packages you're using, and what license types as well. There's one more thing I wanted to mention just while we're getting into settings here. We do have an account type in case you're uninitiated called the enterprise account. Most people are familiar that the top level within any GitHub sort of account is the organization, but we actually have a level higher called the enterprise account, which allows you to apply policy and security settings over many different organizations. This won't apply to everybody, but in case you happen to be sort of an enterprise admin, we do have this available. And if you want to learn more about it, I think we have links in the Twitch stream below. And if you just shoot us a note and we can talk to you more about this. But anyways, I want to show you that we also have a policy within the enterprise account under organizations for allowing visibility into Dependency Insights. So should you have this, or if you're an enterprise admin, you can set that policy there as well. Okay, so jumping back into the Fibonacci repository that we were just in, I'm going to go to Insights and the Dependency Graph. So as I mentioned before, this is going to give us visibility into what dependencies that we're referencing. And what we're doing is that we're reading a manifest file and then we're displaying it here. So immediately we start to see some information that there's security vulnerabilities within our dependencies. So this is something that GitHub has made tremendous investment in, and we really want to, again, we want everybody to develop it in a secure way, or as secure as possible. And we have very effective approaches to help inform you of these security vulnerabilities. But we're not just trying to give you more work by letting you know about this. We have an approach and automated security fixes, which we'll get into a little bit later, about how you can fix this very easily. And we've seen this be enormously successful because we don't require you always to open up a pull request. We can automatically do this, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But if I click into one of these, for example, oh, Cory, did we have a question?
Yeah, actually, well, we have an interesting comment about getting a dependabot alert about Lodash. And I see actually in this repository, we have dependency alerts on Lodash along with a couple other dependencies. So I'd say if we walk through this example, I think if we're following along live, we might be able to mimic exactly what you're doing here within dependency alerts in their own repositories. So I just wanted to make that tie between a comment here in the chat.
Yeah, for sure. So we can actually jump right into that. So Cory, if you want to share the link to my VS Code one, I'm also happy we can follow along with that. So yeah, just like Cory was saying, we're going to have dependabot alerts. So what these are is that they're making us aware of vulnerabilities that are laying latent within our open source dependencies, as we were mentioning. And you can access this from different places. So we can get it from the dependency graph. We're going to have a series of dependabot alerts that we might want to address here. Again, what we were seeing here was our open source dependencies, and we can expand them. Something I just want to add just very quickly is that our dependencies have their own series of dependencies, and you can quickly see that and see if you start to expand these, you can start to see your dependencies, and then their dependencies, and it kind of gets kind of crazy as you go down, or recursive. But yeah, to talk about dependabot alerts just really quickly, following along here, what we'll do is that we'll make you aware of vulnerabilities that exist within your dependencies. And let's just say that we want to sort by severity. So severity is an indication that, critical being the highest, that there's something that's laying latent within this that can be exploited that we really don't want to end up in our software. So it's something that we want to address sooner than later. So for example, using Lodash as an example, if I click into it, we're going to give you a lot of information about what's going on here. Now, what I did here, by the way, is I just forked VS Code, which is fully open source, and I purposefully didn't update it. So I've been a bad developer. I've just been letting it sit here, and it's been accumulating these security vulnerability alerts. So immediately we start to see that we have an open security alert here. We see when it was opened, and then we start to see that we have some information about remediation, about which version of Lodash fixes this vulnerability. But furthermore, we also have information about the CVE number. So for those of you not aware already, we recently became a Cve Numbering Authority. So we now empower open source maintainers on our platform to file CVEs directly from GitHub. So it's our responsibility, being the home of open source and the world's largest development community. We really want to empower open source maintainers to be able to raise the red flag if there's vulnerabilities. For the electrical engineers on the line, I like to say that we're very close to the signal, meaning that we have the open source code on our platform, and we have the maintainers and the contributors, and we've been adding features to our platform to help secure what we're calling the open source supply chain. So the way in which we can do that is by empowering maintainers to raise these CVEs from our platform. There's a couple other features I want to mention too really quickly. One of them is that we also have security policy that you can add to your repository. This will inform people that want to make you aware of a vulnerability, how in which they should do that. So not everybody's a security researcher, and if they find a vulnerability, they just might fire up a public issue and create a zero-day situation, which we don't want. The security advisory allows you to advise the people that are coming to your repository how they should file a vulnerability. Like, you might want this to be done privately, so that way you can start to collaborate with other maintainers without releasing the vulnerability before you have the fix. There's another feature too I want to mention really quickly. We also allow open source repositories that are public to create a private fork, so that way they can collaborate with other maintainers and actually come out with the fix at the same time they're coming out with the alert. So that way it's not something that people can exploit before we have the fix ready. Okay, cool. So just jumping into one of these CVEs, for example, I'm going to click on this critical severity one. We're going to give you information about the affected version. We're going to give you more information about what's going on here. In this case, the affected versions are vulnerable to prototype pollution. My understanding is that that can lead to arbitrary code execution. Definitely something that we want to address. And furthermore, what's really neat is that GitHub will actually give you, if we have it, the pull requests that actually fixes this vulnerability. So again, you can kind of explore with infinite depth here. In this case, we're actually giving you the PR that actually fixes this. So if you actually wanted to dive into the actual lines of code that affix this vulnerability, or read the comments, or find out more information, we're going to give you this information. And what's really cool about this is that we haven't navigated away from GitHub. We're doing this all sort of end to end, right from within our platform. So very powerful. You might not always have to go into this infinite depth, but it's there if you need it, and you can share it with your security team. One more thing too, as I mentioned, we can raise vulnerabilities on our platform. We launched something called the GitHub Advisory Database. So if you want to find out more information about CVEs raised in our platform, we're going to give you a highly curated set of information about what's going on and what the affected environments are. So furthermore, our vulnerability data, just in case it doesn't come from GitHub, that's one source of data, and we'll share that out as well. We also partner with leading authorities in vulnerability data like Mitra and Whitesource as well. So we supplement our data with that. So it's not just like a single source. And as I mentioned before, we also share out our vulnerability data too. We have a GraphQL API, and other folks can parse this as well. We don't just like hoard the data. So, okay, cool. But at the end of the day, what we really want to do is we want to fix this. And we actually have the easy job being software developers to some degree, or software consumers, in this case, open source consumers, that we don't have to fix this. We just have to update our package. So, the open source maintainer is actually doing the tough job. They're actually going ahead and fixing it. Or for those of you that are opening up a PR if the repo is open source, you have the tough job. You're actually going ahead and fixing this. But we as software developers, we just have to update. But honestly, that's a lot to ask for. We're very busy. We're not always given time to do this stuff. We're trying to get features at the door. Our boss is yelling at us. So what we found in practice is that even when we told people that they had a critical severity vulnerability, they still wouldn't patch it. Like even if we said it was really bad, it was something like 3/4 of the people that we would make aware of this after 30 days still would not even update the package version, because it's work that you have to do, and work that you have to do can be, you can choose to not do it. So we still consider this our problem. So what we did is we made an acquisition, GitHub made an acquisition for a company called Dependabot, and we've integrated this into our platform. And now what we do is we automatically open up a pull request that bumps the package version to the version that fixes this vulnerability automatically for you. So that way your engineers can come in the morning and say, shoot, we have a critical severity vulnerability, but it looks like Dependabot has opened up a PR for it. And we can quickly look at the files change and say, okay, cool. We just bumped from 11 to 19 and we changed the hash, looks good to me. Another thing that we give you too is a compatibility score. We measure the success of other open source repositories that have merged this PR. We measure the success of them building afterwards. So, what is it, Friday afternoon for some people? With a 90+% compatibility score, you might feel more comfortable doing this on a Friday afternoon. But if this is like a 1% compatibility score, you might want to save that one, and not merge it and then go home for the weekend, because it might break something. So anyways, this makes it very easy for you to come in the morning and say, okay, we have these PRs that are open, we're bumping the package version, and it's a lot easier to hit the green button, merge pull requests, than it is for you to figure out, which version fixes this vulnerability and fire up a PR and start to do some research. Not everybody on your team needs to be a security researcher. We want to offload some of that thinking for you, so that way you can just get on with what your normal job is, which is creating features and fixing your software's bugs and whatnot. So we're happy to take any questions that you have about this. We hear really, really good feedback. Cory and I work with some of our largest customers, and this is something that's sort of integral to their development process. And we have millions and millions and millions of these PRs that have been opened by Dependabot being merged. And downstream as a software consumer, I use software every day. I'm very happy that this made it in, because this helps make software more secure in general. So just like we saw before with the dependency graph, if you want to enable this, you can go into the same settings page as I just showed you before. So for those of you that are saying like, hey, I don't have this, you can go into settings either at the user level, at the repository level, at the organizational level, at the GitHub enterprise account level, and enable or disable these depending on what you want to do there. And that's for both Dependabot alerts and Dependabot security updates as well. One more bit about security, or about Dependabot as well. You can also look at our documentation to how to configure this. We can also enable this for grabbing the most recent or most updated stable version of that package, regardless of security updates. So Dependabot automated security fixes will update to the minimum version that fixes that vulnerability. This can also be configured to just grab the latest version, regardless if it has a vulnerability or not. So you get to decide on what you want to do there.
Yeah, Glenn, and just to maybe pause on that note, our friend in the chat just merged that PR. So thanks to this demo, we just now, I think, live remediated a security vulnerability for Lodash, which is great. I think we can call it a success. Right?
In the stream.
No.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
And I highly encourage everybody to do that.
Very cool. Yeah,
awesome.
And I think on this point too, this has really been helpful for me in a past life when I was an API engineer. Worked a lot within JavaScript and doing node development, running a lot of middleware, and then having a lot of dependencies. And to your point, updating one dependency can break another dependency, and it can break another dependency. And I think developers' kind of worst scenario is that we're trying to do this in the right light. We're trying to be secure, right? We want to make sure our dependencies are up to date. But then for non-compiled languages, we think about like more interpreted languages, a Ruby or JavaScript, we end up breaking maybe an actual code feature functionality in a repository because we ended up bumping a dependency because of that misunderstanding or lack of understanding of how many dependencies we're actually consuming. So I know I've used that compatibility score a ton with a little, I guess, insurance policy and confidence to know that if I'm going to merge this, I'm not going to have another breaking change somewhere else in my code. It's great for those interpreted languages. And with this being a compiled, or should I say with this being a real pull request, if we have, say, a more compiled language, we can run unit tests. We can run our full build on this PR generated by Dependabot. So there's a lot of confidence that we can instill with this. It's a really, it's a very developer-focused feature.
Yeah, thanks for that, Cory. And yeah, as we're learning too, kind of as we do like retrospectives on what happens with data breaches and things like this, a lot of these could have been simply mitigated by updating the package. So it's not always like a revelation that, it's like this amazing complex thing. Sometimes we just find out that you just need to update the package in order to avoid that, something that can be exploited or something like that. So
yeah, I think it's easy to think that the security workflow can have a high barrier to entry, but it should be kind of centered around developer workflow too, and it can be as simple as just a .11 to .19 in this example, just a quick code change.
And the more that we can empower developers, because security researchers in general, if you're lucky enough to have one of those at your company, they don't scale very well. They're very expensive, right? It's very, very esoteric knowledge. So the more that we can help educate you as a developer about, what's going on within your dependencies, the more you can focus on, building features and getting your job done. So amazing thing. And we'd love to hear also too feedback about if you have used this, what you think about it. So jumping back into that Fibonacci example, what I want to do is I just want to make sure that we capture a thought or sort of the dependency graph. So as I was showing you, we want to be informed about what our dependencies are, what their dependencies are. Of course, we want to know about the security vulnerabilities. A lot of the UX here is, by the way, is going to link back to our security tab. And if you haven't been to GitHub in quite some time, you're going to see new tabs at the top, like, Actions is a new tab. That's our integrated CI/CD environment. So definitely check that out as well. And we have security as well. So we're linking into the security area from our Insights tab. And once we have this information, by the way, so this is at the repository level, and this is going to inform us about what our dependencies are. And also too, if anything is dependent on the software, we can also find this out. Like just for example, if you go to like Ruby, for example, like Ruby Rake, and you go to their Insights tab, and we go to their dependency graph. So yeah, we see that it has direct dependencies, and then we can go to dependents. So what's relying on Ruby Rake? What's really neat about this is that we can see some pretty impressive numbers here. So 1.7 million repositories are dependent on Rake, and almost 81,000 packages are dependent on it. So you can kind of see the impact and sort of how much this is used across the open source community. And it gives us an understanding of, how important this is. So one thing I want to show you next, and this might be a new link for some folks. This is going to be for, I believe this is going to be for enterprise customers only, but what we can do is from all the repositories that have Dependency Graph enabled for, we can see from a global dashboard here, github.com/dependency insights. And again, for those of you that happen to be part of an organization, you can navigate to this by going to Insights and then going to Dependencies. And then we can see, again, sort of across the organization, but across all the organizations that we're a part of, you can click on My Organizations and it will take you to this page. So what we're showing you here, again, is a global dashboard, a single sort of unified view across all your repositories. So we can see a bunch of information here. We can see licenses. We can see sorting by the most dependents. What's our top used open source package? So in this case, I'm part of a bunch of different repositories, and you might want to get this kind of global view. So just for example, we see here that we have a package, Mini Portal 2. It has 1,700 dependents, and we can see information about what environment and ecosystem it is. And if I click in, we can find out more information. Again, this might be a big surprise to you, and I'd be curious to see, for those of you in the stream, what is your top dependency? Like what is most used across your organizations? I'd love to see if it's something similar to what I see here. So if I click into it, what we're doing is that we're scraping the README file from this repository. You can find out more information. So if you want to read through and find out what this is, how it's used, what's going on, documentation. But more importantly, over here, we can see here that we have a version that's from 2018. We can see the version number that is being used currently across all the repositories. Here we can see the license type. And we have some information that's sort of organization specific here. So here we can see that we have 1,704 dependents using this version. What's interesting is that we also have almost 500 dependents using an older version. We might be aware, we might want to be made aware of if someone is using or a repository that we're a part of is using an older or a new version. Again, just like we saw in the dependency graph, we can also dive into its dependencies, and then we can start to expand out and start to go down that rabbit hole there. We can also find out what it's dependent on or what depends on it, and then we can see contributors as well. So if we want to find out who is developing to this package, we can see some quick information there. And then we can also see the open security alerts if there happens to be any. So if we navigate actually back to the dependency insights, we can also look at our open security advisories across all the repositories that we're a part of. And again, you might want to focus your attention on something that has the most amount of security advisories. So here we can see that we can sort by that fact. And if we click into this, for example, we can see here that we have, active security advisories for this package. We can see here that we have, repositories that are using this, and then we can click into the security tab and find out more information about the open CVEs. In this case, we're using a really old version. It's from 2017, so it's about 3 years old, and we have 46 open security advisories. So we might want to disproportionately pay attention to this one as opposed to others and make sure that we fix this, because it seems like there's a lot of things that need to be addressed. And again, when you click into the CVE number, we're going to bring you to our advisory database and talk to you more about what's going on here. And you might want to focus some of your attention on this. There's another thing I want to say too about the Dependency Insights dashboard here. So you might, again, as I mentioned before, you might consider certain license types risky. Now GitHub is not going to tell you what we consider risky, because it's going to vary depending what vertical that you're in. If you're in healthcare, or if you're banking, or whatever it may be. But what this will do is that this will inform you about what license types that are used across the dependencies that you're referencing. So if there was an advisory from your policy team or from your lawyers that's saying that, okay, we shouldn't be using this license type anymore because an underlying sort of term within it is sort of not aligning with the enterprise that we happen to be in, you can fire up a GitHub issue and assign somebody to take a look at that and maybe migrate away from that package type. So this might give you sort of some insight into license type, and maybe you have more dependencies with a specific license type than you realize, and maybe that's something you want to address in the future. Okay, cool. Yeah, we're happy to take any questions. We're about 37 minutes in, and this is what I wanted to cover for today. I really hope that this was informative and that you're learning a few things. I'll hang out for a minute or two more and we'll take some questions if we have any. Again, we have William on from our product team as well, so if you want to ask anything directly from the GitHub product team, we're happy to take those.
Yeah. And just for context too, I dropped github.com/dependency insights. That's a live link, so if you're signed in to GitHub, you'll show up and it'll actually take you right to your dependency insights page. So similar to how Glenn was signed into his account, he saw his dependency insights, you will as well. So you can both see your maybe most dependent package, but then on the security side of this, maybe what advisories you want to take care of. We won't want to pick on anybody on the stream if you have some security issues you need to fix in your code, but it would be fun to see maybe what languages are used. It looks like in our dependency insights here, we're using a lot of JavaScript, we're using a lot of NPM as an ecosystem, but maybe some folks are using other ecosystems like more Java code, or maybe NuGet packages with .NET. So we'd love to know maybe as well a breakdown of what type of languages folks are programming in today, because GitHub's also looking for both that feedback, but then also that kind of community response of what the most trending languages are in the kind of dev space, and then as well maybe why you're using that language. Is there a lot of open source packages for JavaScript that make it easier for you to build your web applications, or maybe there's trending topics around .NET and NuGet that we want to focus on as well. So we'd love to know, I guess, with the folks that are in the stream, what your dependency insights look like, what languages you're using, maybe what dependents are most dependent in your code, maybe what open source packages are most trending here. We hear that you see in the chat that there's quite a bit of React third-party packages, so some front-end JavaScript development. That's great. Lots of dependencies there. The trees of front-end languages can be very, very deep. And Glenn and I see that a lot within enterprise customers, that they start to use more and more open source code, whether it be for a front-end project or maybe a back-end service that we're going to start. And then that tree of trees, if you will, of how many dependents my dependents have, is what GitHub's really great at being able to solve for folks. So looks like we have most dependents are Express, React, Redux, Request from NPM. So yeah, a lot of JavaScript, which is great. I have some context there, so I can certainly talk to it.
Yeah, some good points, Cory. Yeah, what we typically see is that people way underestimate the amount of dependencies that they actually have, and then they're not aware of those indirect dependencies. So I really hope that this is sort of enlightening, and for those folks that are now enabling the Dependabot security automated fixes, that's real cool, and we're really happy that you did that, and definitely pay attention to those PRs, and software is going to get more secure as a result of you doing that, so thank you.
Yeah. We did build some insurance as well in that, in case you don't pay attention to those pull requests, they'll continually get added as new commits. And I've seen that in my own repositories. I'll maybe not merge a Dependabot PR right off the bat, but then Dependabot will keep scanning and keep adding more and more pull requests. So we'll make sure that when you are ready to merge that PR, hopefully we'll be doing that as soon as we put them in your repo. But even after that, we'll keep your Dependabot dependencies up to date as they get updated from the maintainers. What we're really trying to do is focus that information back from the maintainers and the work that they're doing, and show that they're continually investing in their projects as you should be continually investing in yours, kind of bridging that gap between private development and open source development, because more and more folks are of course consuming open source, but we want to make sure they're doing it securely too. That's kind of what this feature is really all about.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Cory. So just to reiterate that, we'll continue to open up these pull requests and update them as the package accumulates more vulnerabilities. So it's not just static and going to sit there forever. It's going to be updated over time. All right, awesome. So again, thank you all for joining the stream. I hope you learned something today. And again, if you want to see more topics in the future, we're going to continue to do these every Friday. So definitely join us next Friday too as well. I think we have Niels, another SC that's going to be presenting. And we'd love to hear more topics for the future.
Yeah, thanks all. We'll see you next week.